Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, anyone on the panel can answer this. The HIPAA law of 1996 does not allow or does cover by law pre-existing conditions employer to employer. That is correct?
Yes.
Yes.
That is correct.
Oh, I just wanted to get that in for the record then. I do want to talk a little bit about what the ACA has done in Minnesota. Now, there's a lot of talk from the other side about how repeal would impact certain groups, but we know what the law has already done. In my home state of Minnesota, which is really at the epicenter of all this with MNsure, the Commerce Commissioner there called it an emergency situation. 2 years of back-to-back premium increases, 50% and 67%. 100,000 people being shoved into a default option. The governor, Governor Mark Dayton, whom we're all wishing well today, called the Affordable Care Act is, quote, no longer affordable. It is an existential crisis in the state of Minnesota. So we can talk all day long about what repeal and replace is going to look like, but we know what the current law looks like. And it has been a disaster. 1,000 counties in the United States have one insurer to choose from. Now I want to focus a little bit about on two things. One, employer coverage, as well as what we call the age rating or community rating in some circles. First of all, I believe Grace Marie Turner has commented on the Affordable Care Act not just hitting the individual market. What we're hearing from the other side is, well, gosh, you're just talking about 5% of the people in the individual market being hurt by all of this. It's no big deal. 95% of the people have coverage in their very healthy employer pool. But in fact, the Affordable Care Act has really impacted employer coverage too, has it not?
Absolutely. And as we heard earlier, the requirements of the law have significantly driven up costs and deductibles to the cost that the average family policy for employers is now $18,000 a year, more than $4,000 higher than it was before, not the $2,500 savings that they were promised.
And Mr. Book, to your point, an acquaintance of mine recently was offered a plan at work, again, not the individual market, employer-based coverage. His deductible was $13,000. The family plan was well over $1,500 a month. This is living proof that health insurance is no longer health care.
Right. Well, yes, and that's a kind of deductible was unheard of before the ACA. Nobody had a $13,000 deductible before that.
It used to be in the market-based economy, it would work a little bit like the bond, 10-year bond. Right. You know, the interest rates go up, the bond goes down. Right. Premiums go up, your co-pays, deductibles go down. Right. Now we're getting massive hikes in premiums, along with massive hikes in co-pays, stricter drug formularies.
Correct.
All sorts of things that were unheard of just a few years ago.
That's absolutely right.
Anybody else want to comment on that?
I would like to comment. There was some turmoil in the early years of the ACA in Minnesota because of problems with underpricing by the co-op and then the removal of the risk corridor payments that were intended to pay, and that was a congressional decision, and that really financially harmed the market in Minnesota tremendously, and I get that. But 380,000 people have gained insurance coverage through or are at risk of losing their health insurance coverage through repeal in Minnesota alone.
I can tell you the insurance companies are more than making up for that underpricing early on.
No, and I understand that.
67%.
And there are some strategies that we can discuss for stabilizing the market there and increasing competition within the framework of the Affordable Care Act.
I think there's just going to be soon one insurer left in MNsure, the state exchange. They're fleeing the state.
But if you want to discuss it, I can give you some ideas of how you might increase competition.
I want to get one more question in for Mr. Helsemeyer, and that is, do you know of any economic model where freely floating prices are not a requirement for the proper allocation of assets?
No.
All right, so why are we putting price controls on the health insurance market that basically says, well, gosh, the price has to be within a band for everybody, which is effectively jacked up premiums so high that we've priced young people out of the healthcare market?
Well, basically, that's a pricing convention, and what you can do is you can sort of categorize them in bands. The problem there is, yes, you've compressed the bands to the point where you've increased the cost for young adults significantly more than you have, reduced them for older people and priced them out of the market. Yeah, it was one of the things that really, even from the perspective of a supporter of this law, didn't make a lot of sense to start with, because those are people who are most likely to be price sensitive and uninsured.
I think Milton Friedman warned us about price controls at one point, right? Causing surpluses and shortages. Yeah. All right, thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back my time.